You're back with us on the C Morning Show. I mean, if we see the digital technologies development lately, it's been amazing. And one such technology is virtual reality, or VR. And we're integrating that more and more in our daily lives. Either it's for games, educations, or storytelling. Now, the technology allows us to immerse ourselves in various unique and amazing worlds just by putting on a headset, or we call Oculus. And this can be very immersive or fully immersive, where everything we see is part of a carefully constructed artificial environment. So when you look down, you'll be able to see the sky, everything around you. It's a pretty amazing experience.
I did this on a little virtual tour
at
Camp Nou for Barcelona football club, my favorite. And one of the parts of the tour was we put it on so you could get the experience of being a fan at the stadium. And honestly, I was like, oh, how real is it going to be? But it felt pretty real once you're actually in there. You felt like you're there and you could see the crowd, but there was actually nothing there.
Right.
So, how about VR for movies, though? Did you know that filmmakers are now using VR in short films and even full-length features as well? Some examples of short films which do utilize VR technology are Lifeline, Sergeant James, The Hourglass, Meet Mortaza, and The Replacements, or Penggantian, which screened at the Minikino Film Week in Bali last month.
That is correct. And now let's talk about this film, Replacements. And that's why we have the director or filmmaker or the animation artist, the Indonesian-French animator, illustrator, and director, Jonathan Hagard, right here in the studio with us. Good morning, Jonathan.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us, Jonathan.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I've heard of this film. I've actually seen the film.
Okay.
Paul, it was probably about last year. You actually held a small screening, a pretty private screening, where you invited a lot of friends or acquaintances to watch this film, Replacements. So tell us about this exhibition that you're doing now in Dialogue in Jakarta.
Yes, so first, I was very surprised by many events when I finished this film, Replacements, because, as you know, it's a film that is really personal and also very Indonesian, because it talks about the history of a fictional kampung in Jakarta from the 80s to nowadays. So I really wanted to make it for Indonesian people. But COVID came. I was in Japan, because this is where I live. Couldn't leave the country. So to make a screening in Indonesia was almost impossible. So what I managed to do is to do it in Tebet with a friend who lived there. And then I went back a few months ago to Indonesia to work on my new film in Bali. And then, from now, I really wanted to make a screening, an installation. So that's why I made the first one in Ubud a few months ago in Rumah Topeng. And then I make the first one in Jakarta in Dialogue. So this time it's a real art installation where we can see the archives and documents to see the film, and also experiment the VR film.
Wow. And the VR film is how long again, Jonathan?
It's 13 minutes.
13 minutes. And please remind us, what is the film about? You mentioned a little bit earlier, it's about, you know, a fictional kampung in Jakarta from the 80s to now. What are you trying to say with this film?
So yeah, it's actually a follow-up of my first film I made in 2008. That was also about a kampung in Jakarta that was replaced by a shopping mall, which is now Grand Indonesia. And so that place has changed a lot. And I really wanted to, after these years, I was not satisfied by the film in many ways. And so that's why I really wanted to update it. And then in the end, because Jakarta changed a lot in more than 10 years. So in 2007, I wanted to make a new film that first show how the city changed again, and also my point of view on the city, and I also changed myself. So, and I thought that new data was quite complicated to show in a conventional film, which is why I was also experimenting with VR, and VR was actually a good way to show a story and show the complexity of this city, which is in a way like 360 degrees, because there are so many details we cannot focus on the same time, and VR was a good way to to depict the complexity of Jakarta.
Yeah.
Well, talking about VR, I mean, obviously there's ways that people can kind of, there's many ways you can make films or short films apart from doing it an actual live shoot. You can just do regular conventional animation or 3D animation. Why did you choose VR? Because most people would think right away, oh, I have to get a headset. Did you think about the complexities of how it would be viewed?
To be honest, there was a lot of learning and improvisation because it's in the middle of the production that I decided to make it in VR. Because first I wanted to make it, not from the beginning. From the beginning I wanted to make it as like a new short film, but then it was so complex to do, and I was also quite not attracted by VR.
Oh, okay.
Really not attracted by VR because I thought it was a new way to be even deeper in post-reality, where like we would I wanted to do something that is quite documentary. But I thought that, but then my point of view changed when I thought, but maybe VR like not only fit this storytelling, but it can also be a way to go back to reality and show something about reality that we don't really understand from the first sight. So, which is why I thought that, okay, let's do it in VR and learn from that. Of course, there was a lot of challenge in terms of distribution and exhibition.
Sure.
Yeah, so so yeah, we have to accept that it's not, it's still, I think, not as easy to watch as like a film in a theater,
right.
because you have to watch the film one by one. So this is a challenge in terms of screening, because you have to, okay, if during one day that this amount of people want to watch it, you have to have several VR sets, and if you have one, you have to be quite organized.
It's quite limited.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's limited, yeah.
Yeah, unless, I mean, it could be a collective experience if, you have a huge hall and you have a lot of Oculus and then you watch it at the same time.
You'd have to have a whole bunch of units. Right?
Exactly. I mean, but, I have experience. I've watched Jonathan's film, and it was definitely a different experience, a different way to experience a film. Because in a way, if you watch a 2D film, you can be absolutely touched by it, but, you can even times that by 3. Right. Because I remember being very emotionally affected after I finished watching your film. So it is, if you want to have a VR film watching experience, it will bring you to a deeper individual experience. And
more immersive, isn't it?
It's super immersive that you can't help but reflect about what you just saw when you do that. So you also have this new film that you are currently doing, which is set in Bali. It's called Bergantian. It's not penggantian. It's Bergantian or Alternates. What can you tell us about this film this time?
So, in terms of story, I thought that in Penggantian, Replacements, there was something I wanted to talk, but I couldn't talk about. It's because, as I said, it's quite personal, and actually, like my mother, she was born in Bali.
Oh, your mother was born in Bali, but she's actually Javanese, no?
Yeah, but she grew up in Java. But she still has a lot of, she's still very connected with Bali.
Yeah.
And I am also, when I go to Bali, every time it's like I'm going home. And also, like, many Javanese people also think that Bali is like how Java used to be years ago. And even now, because, Java, especially Jakarta, is changing more and more. So, and when we go to Bali, it's like Bali is, it's like it's freeze in time in many ways.
It's like a time capsule.
Yes, and it's so I wanted to. I had several times the ideas. How will Bali always be like this, or can it change? Like, let's say Java or Sumatra or even Malaysia has changed or other countries in Asia. How would it be if Bali would change?
Yes.
And I think COVID was a good timing because like it was a big change and a big challenge for all the planet, and especially Bali in Indonesia, because as you know, like this, one of the reasons that Bali is frozen in time, it's also because of historical accidents and tourism. And when mass tourism stopped in Bali, like the first idea is that when I was talking with a good friend in Kyoto who has he's a Balinese and has a restaurant, and like it's the first time I saw him worrying.
Really?
Worrying, like, and especially it was in the beginning of the COVID. There was some like political things in Indonesia, and then he was. Yeah, maybe Bali can change. If we forgot, if we forget our history, Bali can change, and it's not good or bad. It's like okay. So, and then this was the first idea of the film, and then I made a residence in Bali, where I meet someone we call the crazy guy in the kampung. His family call it the confused guy, and I wanted to make a story about him because I identify a lot with this guy who, like, he's reasonable in many ways. But he's still crazy, and he...
What does he think about that makes you think that? Is he thinking about the future, imaginary?
Yeah, he lives in other realities. He lives in other alternate realities. And
he's Balinese, yeah?
Yeah, and he's, in that film, he imagines a reality where his kampung, his family, is in an alternate reality of Bali, where all the culture, and especially the nature, has disappeared. Yes, and we imagine... But I want to make this story like very Indonesian, how this family, and especially the main character, in that reality, will still be connected to its roots. Which I think it's very Indonesian because we see it in Jakarta, because Jakarta is very, very unrooted in many ways, but still, we see traditions and roots everywhere when we go to the kampung. And so I want this to be something where Balinese people can really be relate, because Bali can really be like this, but in the same time, Jakarta people, other people, oh yeah, we actually became like this. But it's never the end of the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I would like to do a little follow-up question. How important, it seems that your films always have this almost a message, like it's very important to connect to your roots always, because you yourself, you have an interesting background because your mom is Javanese and your father is French, and you live in Kyoto in Japan. And you speak 4 languages, you know, but you seem to always be drawn into like the importance of understanding our roots and carrying our roots wherever we go, and you've worked globally as well. Why is that important to you?
Yeah, as you said, I'm very connected to my Indonesian roots, but I'm still a French citizen, and I grew up in France, and I feel still more Asian in many ways, so that's why I feel I'm very happy in Japan. But I like to, like, when we like to argue about politics, about cultures, I try to get back to simple things, to things that that bound us as humans. And when we think about it, there are not so many things that are important and that we all share. And one of these things is the generational change. And like my grandmother in Saragen, she also said that to remember the roots to understand the future. And that philosophy is universal. We hear it in Europe, in Japan, in Africa, in everywhere. And because everybody has parents, have grandparents, and everybody care about their future and their children. So it's that's a very simple philosophy that was very important in Replacements, much more than the first film, Time Lapse, I made. And I also want to use that philosophy in Alternates, but more, it will be more Indonesian in a way, like more...
Really?
Yeah. More spiritual, more like gas. Replacements was more like about foundations, more structural. This time it will be more yeah, a little bit more abstract and metaphysical.
Wow.
That's very cool.
I know, right?
So Marissa mentioned you living in Japan.
Yeah.
You're also planning to make a movie in Japan, correct? It's, if not mistaken, called Silent Memories, which is expected to premiere in 2025. So can you tell us a little bit about it? Is it connected in any way with your previous project?
Yeah, 2025, hopefully, but maybe it will be
Sure.
later, because I think it will be a quite important story. That's because I always wanted to make a story about just reality in general. Right? I mean, that was inspired me to make virtual reality. It's how we see reality. And so it's not about culture, it's just about how people, humans, see reality. And I believe that the change we have, the era change we have since the end of the 20th century and now the beginning of the 21st century is how we see reality. I think humans always have to deal between reality and fantasy and storytellings. So that's why there is like books, religions, but which makes beautiful civilizations. And I believe that several decades ago, it was maybe half reality, half storytelling. And more, we have the technology to be 90%, even more.
We're out of touch with reality.
In storytellings,
Right.
and maybe 10% in reality. And I guess, little by little, these two will blend or not. So that's a big question we have for the future. And I think Japan is a really good setting for that story. I've been there for 8 years, and I have many friends there who are more than 60, 70 years old. So yeah, this story will be quite challenging because it's I'm not Japanese.
Yeah.
So of course there is a question of like am I a legitimate person to make that story? So I will work with other people to do that. And this is a story from the point of view of one programmer about his life from 1980s to 2080s.
2000.
Whoa!
So yeah, half of the story will be quite realistic, but half of the stories will be, of course,
Very cool.
fictional, imaginary, and it will be probably my imagination, and so it will be a mix of. But we see it in replacement and alternates because it's like alternates is also about reality, but from the point of view of a crazy guy, and But this one, Silent Memories, will be even more about that transition to that kind of reality.
Future 2080.
Cool.
So when you said you have friends, Japanese friends who are now in their 70s, are you thinking of like interviewing them to sort of like compare life back then and then life now, and then sort of like merge between the two to create a future? What's the significance of these Japanese friends to make sure that your story will be, as you said, it's like you're not Japanese, to be as authentic and as acceptable as possible?
Of course, this story, I have to admit that this story will be quite personal.
Oh,
So
even more personal, okay.
It will be quite personal, although the main character will be a Japanese. But it's about Japan. It's about artificial intelligence in Japan, and artificial intelligence is impersonal. It's impersonal, but it relates to like many kind of people, and and it's a good thing because, well, I worked in advertising. Now I work in cinema, and the place I live in Kyoto, it's actually one of the only places where there is no convenience store, because there are many old people who live around there.
Right.
So yeah, I'm inspired by a lot of people and a lot of places I saw in Japan. Also, the setting takes place in Tokyo. Yeah.
How exciting.
Fitting place for it.
Yeah.
The storyline.
Absolutely, right. And your exhibition in Jakarta started or opened on the 19th of October until the
15th of November.
15th of November in Dialogue. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thank you very much.
It was a very fascinating discussion. I cannot wait to watch the film. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you very much.
All right, folks, we're going to take another short break here, but when we return, we're going to recap some of our earlier stories from around the world. Stay with us on the C Morning Show. We'll be right back after this.